Um, uh, let me try to help you out of here a little bit anyway. There's a few things going on when you look at the spraying, but the stuff that you're seeing up at that altitude that you're seeing, uh, it's technically aluminum oxide. Aluminum oxide is essentially a very fine uh, material that you put on sandpaper. Okay. Uh, and it's not pure aluminum, it's aluminum oxide. It's a very fine uh, talcum powder type of material. The reason that it's up there, why are they doing this? Let's start there first. Are
Well,
they
I know
doing it
what they
to make
say,
you
but
sick? No,
I
hold
don't.
on a second. Are they doing it to make you sick?
Well, one thing they originally they told us they were doing it for global warming and it was
No.
reflecting the sunlight, but that's a lie because it keeps the heat in at night.
Yeah, you a lot of times do stuff. You say one thing to the public and you have it for a different reason. What was the context of the reason why we started spraying? It was because uh, that was in the SDI period. The part that you're too young to remember this. Old people like me remember this. Okay, in the late '70s, early '80s, the Soviet Union was using weather modification, uh, not by spraying or other toxins. They were doing it by pushing the jet stream, and they were using standing wave radar arrays across northern Russia to push the jet stream in the U.S. south. And so we had huge freezes, oranges freezing in the spring in Florida, uh, huge destruction, uh, throwing the growth cycles out for crops across the U.S. Um, and that pushing of the jet stream was a huge, huge issue. Part of the response to that, besides the political responses that happened behind the scenes, and even such things as Afghanistan, et cetera, to mess with them back, uh, part of that was SDI, Strategic Defense Initiative, and the um, uh, looking at options to cause them not to be able to do things. One of those options, of course, HARP was put in place. HARP uses this ability to send very highly focused waves to heat up areas of the atmosphere, et cetera, where we could deflect missiles or cause problems with missiles, et cetera, as they come in, cause them to heat up. At lower altitudes, this dust in the high atmosphere that's sprayed out there could be used to not allow intercontinental ballistic missiles to get in. Screws with their satellite observations. It does all sorts of different things. The other things that you see that they see at the ground level are literally just jet fuel, because the carrier agent, that when you see that stuff coming out of the aircraft up there at 44,000 feet, when it comes out, it's in a carrier that doesn't freeze, which is jet fuel. It's designed to go down, 65, 70 below zero, and it doesn't, it stays liquid. It's like antifreeze. So that's the carrier. It's kerosene. It's got all sorts of trace other things in it to make it work for jet fuel and stabilize it and all that sort of thing. And that's what you're seeing dissipate out into a cloud-like form. Most people say that the next day I got sick from it. That material that was sprayed that day, it went downrange 1,000 miles, and it stayed in the atmosphere a couple of times around the Earth. Much of it stays up there for, more than months at a time. It can even be years at a time. So most of the people saying that it might be a psychological reaction. It's not reaction from the stuff that gets, it might have the reaction from stuff that happened a long time ago. All of that, I know, doesn't sound like an adequate answer, but the reality is it forced other governments to look at other technologies that are slower, such as hypersonic missiles, as opposed to intercontinental ballistic missiles, and bought us a little bit of time.
Is that open? Does that answer
Was there?
question,
Hold on,
Fabian?
I'm not quite there. Let me just finish this. Hold on, Nino. If I don't answer this correctly, it will not help her, and other people are going to have other questions. Just give me a second here. That the problem is, I understand that it's not quite an adequate answer. Part of the problem is that we're in a point of transition now. We have other weapon systems coming available now, and all sides are changing. Did it modify the weather? Yes. Did it have an impact on crops and trees across the country, especially in the Western U.S.? Absolutely. Did it have unintended consequences? Yeah, including an airline crash that nobody saw coming, and changes that had to be made in the way that the disbursement occurred, which was primarily in the West Coast earlier in the operations and then going west to east. Is it perfect? No, but the consequence of not doing it in some of the people's calculation, a judgment call was made and a decision was made that probably did buy us time and averted other threats. Will this go on forever? No. And I think that there is a horizon that's becoming clearer by the minute where this will be decreased radically. At a certain level, let me just say this. Do you believe, and I know I'll have some people that'll disagree, but do you believe that Donald Trump, when he was briefed on this, if he thought that the threat from not doing it was not adequate to make that decision, and decided to go ahead and keep it in place because the threat from not doing it was so great that even though it causes problems and there is disruption and there is health risks, that number was less than the problem that you would have if you didn't have this deployed? A hard decision had to be made. And I believe it was the correct decision. And I believe that we will stop this spraying in the not that distant future. But that's several years out. That's not days or weeks out. There is a reason why it's so highly classified. They don't want to admit it. Lots of guys have gotten great documentation, pieced it together, shown what's going on, shown all the concerns about the health risks. They've done yeoman's work. I was familiar with this back in the late 80s and the early 90s and all the time in between. And I know a lot of the guys that did all that early work. But I had somebody that's a very honest researcher here, I don't know, probably 5 years ago now, and had spent a huge amount of time on this. We got to save the planet. Gaia has got to have this and that and everything else. And when he got all done and looked at it and says, you know what, I get it. I think we have to keep spraying, and I don't think we can stop because of the threats to us. It used to be nation state level stuff only from Russia. And now we know that we have a lot of other threats that maintaining control of that atmospheric flow, you don't do it in a day or a week. We have systems in place that are in fact pumping the atmosphere and protecting us. And at this point in time, with the history of the world the way it is, with the threats at other nation state levels, if we didn't control it that way, we'd be in much greater threat on lots of different levels, not just crops, but military threats, that we do have to own the weather for the time being. It's just the way it is. And so there you go.
All right, Fabian, is that good?
That's fine. Just have him contact you with who, if the people that want to complain to stop it sooner or make them aware we want it to end.
They know completely. Believe me, the guys in power know exactly what's going on. And they, for the most part, you can scream bloody murder. You can demonstrate in front of all the places. They're not going to listen to you, and they don't care because they understand the threat is at that level right now. Till we get past that threat stage, a bunch of people jumping up and down isn't going to make one hill of beans of difference. We are in the threat of nuclear war right this second. This exact second, we are in an instant threat from Russia of going into an intercontinental ballistic missile exchange. It will go